CCUS, DACC, BECCS, afforestation, reforestation. The world of carbon dioxide removal is complex, but on the whole, what is its current state? What are the open problems, and where are we making progress? So the official definition used by the IPCC is human activities capturing CO2 from the atmosphere and storing it durably in geological, land or ocean reservoirs, or in products. This includes human enhancement of natural removal processes, but excludes natural uptake not caused directly by human activities. According to the State of Carbon Removal report, a method has to deliver in both capture and storage for it to be considered carbon removal. For example, if you look at this diagram, you can see that forestry counts, because it captures CO2 and then stores it underground. But in the case of some direct air capture technologies, the CO2 is taken from the atmosphere but doesn't store it because it's used for fuel. The methods for which carbon can be captured and stored are many, and this number is growing, but has there been meaningful progress on the whole? Despite still only accounting for about 4% of climate change research, scientific interest in carbon removal has grown exponentially at about 19% per year since the 1990s, at a faster rate than research on climate change, which has increased at about 13%. Growth in public funding, patenting and investment show that innovation in carbon dioxide removal is active. Global public investment in carbon dioxide removal research, development and demonstration was approximately $4.1 billion between 2010 and 2022, $3.5 billion of which came from investment in direct air capture from the US. And this investment continues to grow as a further 200 million of purchases have been made between 2020 and 2022, again 75% of which was invested in direct air capture. Carbon removal patenting has also increased over the last 15 years, with a large and growing share occurring in China. And there's also been some progress in policy regarding carbon removal. Namely, the US has expanded tax credits in a bid to support carbon removal deployment, and the EU is busy investing in innovation funds. Most of us are familiar with the story of how technologies tend to become popular. A technology is created, it grows in popularity, but only gets adopted when it becomes more advantageous to its alternatives, which usually means that it's cheaper or more convenient. This more or less sums up the biggest open problems with carbon removal technologies. There is still a clear lack of adoption. The State of Carbon Removal report found that despite the heavy investment in technologies like direct air carbon capture, only 0.1% of carbon removal actually comes from new technologies like biochar and carbon capture. The other 99.99% came from conventional forms of carbon capture that rely on Earth's natural processes like reforestation, meaning the restoration of forests, afforestation, meaning the planting of new forests, and other forms of land management. Well, it really depends on the technology. Direct air carbon capture is still too expensive, as the International Energy Agency states. Capturing CO2 from the air is the most expensive application of carbon capture. The CO2 in the atmosphere is much more dilute than in, for example, flue gas from a power station or a cement plant. This contributes to direct air capture's high energy needs and costs relative to these applications. So clearly the price is too high at the moment, but as with all technologies, can we not simply wait until it's cheap enough? Well, no, not if we want to prevent a highly impactful climate event. Virtually all scenarios that limit warming to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees require new carbon removal methods, such as biochar and direct air carbon capture. So closing the carbon removal gap will require immediate and rapid growth of new tech. In 2030, global scenarios that limit warming to 2 degrees or lower indicate additional carbon dioxide removal of 0.96 gigatons of CO2 per year, compared with 2020. But most countries have only pledged an additional 0.1 to 0.65 gigatons of CO2 by 2030. And similarly, by 2050, an additional 4.8 gigatons is needed. But again, most countries have only proposed an additional 1.5 to 2.3 gigatons per year by 2050. So it is fair to say that there is still a clear gap between what is needed and what we are targeting. So what would a good future look like? Well, we need to start by investing more in carbon removal. As we mentioned earlier, $4.1 billion of public funds have been invested in carbon removal in the 12 years between 2010 and 2022. But when compared to the fact that investment in global energy research and development amassed a total of $17 billion in 2021 alone, $4 billion seems tiny. As $3.5 billion of the $4 billion was invested in direct air carbon capture, it's worth giving special attention to. According to the IEA, plans for at least 130 direct air capture facilities are now at various stages of development. If all were to advance, even those at an early concept stage, direct air capture deployment would reach the level required in 2030 under the net zero emissions by 2050 scenario. But as we've seen, this doesn't necessarily mean for the state of carbon removal as a whole. Future policy, according to the State of Carbon Removal report, will need to ensure that carbon dioxide removal governance develops robust accounting rules and trusted measurement, reporting and verification frameworks. One example of this is looking closer into case studies and identifying commonalities and differences in governance and policy-making practices throughout the world, which will eventually help people to understand the various enabling and constraining conditions that influence the upscaling of carbon dioxide removal. Although it is clear there is a lot to do, there is progress coming in the future, according to the IEA. The United States and Canada are both offering tax credits to projects that support direct air capture innovation. And in the United Kingdom, the 2023 spring budget announced funding of up to £20 billion for CCUS applications, including direct air capture. And Japan in January 2023 set a carbon capture roadmap with a target of capturing between 6 and 12 megatons of CO2 per year by 2030. Professor Pierre Friedlingstein of Exeter University's Global Systems Institute and the lead of the Global Carbon Budget said, "CDR cannot solve the climate crisis alone. It's widely acknowledged that deep cuts in global CO2 emissions are also urgently needed to limit global warming." Yet the latest figures from the Global Carbon Budget report published in November last year show that total CO2 emissions remain high at a projected 40.6 billion tonnes of CO2 in 2022, with no sign of the rapid decrease needed. And Steve Smith, a lead author of the State of Carbon Removal report, said, "To limit warming to 2 degrees or lower, we need to accelerate emissions reductions. We also need to increase carbon removal by restoring and enhancing ecosystems and rapidly scaling up new CDR methods." To look at this on the whole, there seems to be a pretty general consensus that although carbon removal methods and technologies are increasing, there still remains a gap between what is needed and what our targets are. There is definite general agreement on the fact that it is a crucial part of the race to net zero. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you'd like to keep updated on my weekly videos, and have a look at my website at www.stateofknowledge.com. See you next time for more big picture content.